You're listening to the Back Porch Talk podcast. Danny and Jason had many discussions and debates on the back porch while making pivotal investment moves with assets. That's right, with trading cards. They welcome you to the back porch and right into those discussions about current sports news with a fresh and unique twist. So come on and join us. Welcome to the Back Porch Talk podcast. I'm your coach, Jason.
Your coach, Danny.
Fans, we got a full show for you today, so let's get to a little NFL talk, a little bit about college football and the playoffs. But first to the NFL, Danny, where on Thursday night, the Tennessee Titans went to Lambeau Field and beat the Green Bay Packers 27-17, and where Aaron Rodgers threw for 2 touchdowns, 227 yards, 24 for 39, and Ryan Tannehill, 22 for 27, very efficient game for 333 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Danny, I think what I saw in this game basically was the making of the end of the season for the Green Bay Packers, man. I think this is it. I'm starting to think on whether or not if the Packers should go ahead and start Jordan Love, see what they got. Derrick Henry ran the ball for 28 times, 87 yards and a touchdown, threw for a touchdown as well. The Packers' offensive line needs a little help. It needs to be shored up. The Packers went away from the rush here. Aaron Jones, 12 carries for 40 yards. A.J. Dillon, only 6 carries for 13 yards. I mean, Christian Watson had a good game, 4 catches. 2 of those were touchdowns, and he had 48 yards. Randall Cobb, thank goodness he came back, 6 receptions for 73 yards. Allen Lazard, 5 catches, 57 yards. But I'll say this again, Danny, that offensive line needs a little help. And it cannot take away from what I saw out of Aaron Rodgers either, man. There were a few errant throws that he made, especially in the fourth quarter, especially as they were driving and where they could have even tied the game up. And I remember it was a 4th down play and where he just overshot Sammy Watkins and all. And so I just think that from what Aaron Rodgers was saying, apparently today, you know, he may have broken his thumb or something's going on with his thumb or whatever the case may be. Either way, man, let's just be real. The season seems to be over for the Packers in terms of making the playoffs. And I guess the big question is, what do we get out of Jordan Love? Danny, what would you do? Would you go ahead and just start Jordan Love to see what you get out of him? Maybe if not in the next couple of games, maybe the last couple of games of the season, or would you just continue to roll with Aaron Rodgers? What would you do in this case?
I think Aaron Rodgers is not going to pull himself out of the game unless they're mathematically eliminated. Then he may consider it, but obviously something's wrong with his thumb. And every time he misses a pass, he looks at his thumb or he's over there flexing his thumb. I don't see him sitting out until like they're mathematically eliminated because there is, I think it's like a 6% chance. But the NFC, we saw some games this past weekend where it's like you get a glimmer of hope, like Detroit doing what they did to the New York Giants, where it is open. And Dallas, who they just beat last week, blew the doors off of the Minnesota Vikings. So,
man,
so that's where I see him saying, "No, I'm playing until I can't play until there's no reason to play." Because then you want to save him for next year because you got all that money invested in him or whatever you're going to do. But I think until then, Jordan Love's going to be on the bench unless he says otherwise.
And, you know, there hasn't been any good talk or good vibrations coming out of training camp or throughout the course of the season or through practices about how Jordan Love is doing such an awesome job or is doing so great. This seems like it's just been kind of status quo, if you will. So I'm pretty certain they could have used that number one draft pick, first round draft pick, for another position that they're in need of right now. Maybe that could have even gone to a wide receiver. Maybe it could have gone to offensive lineman at this particular moment in time, which we actually need right now. Packers got a long way. Next up is the Philadelphia Eagles, boy. I tell you, it doesn't get any easier for the Green Bay Packers, man. So congratulations, Tennessee Titans. Packers, you got a long way to go. Danny, on to the Atlanta Falcons against the Chicago Bears. What say you?
Jason, we pulled it out 27-24. This was, as all Atlanta Falcons games, back and forth, went down to the end. And one key note in this game, even though he got the victory, Kyle Pitts got hurt. So he hurt his MCL, and it looks like he may be out for the season. I think it will depend on if they make the playoffs, if he comes back. So right now they put him on IR, which he's going to miss at least the next 4 weeks, and then they'll evaluate him after that. But all in all, good game. We had Mariota, his usual 13 for 20, 131 yards and a touchdown. And he ran the ball 13 times, and he had a key touchdown run where he laid himself out and put himself out there and got in the end zone. So they ended up running for 140 yards in this game. And the Bears, also on their end, they ran the ball really well. We are a team that can be run on. They had 160 yards rushing. Justin Fields also got hurt in this game. So we'll see. And it was at the end of the game, too, where the Bears called some interesting plays in that last sequence where they put Justin Fields kind of out there where I didn't get, and he ended up hurting his shoulder. So that may impact them going into next week against the Jets. But Cordero Patterson also made history in this game. Ninth kickoff return for a touchdown. So he was tied with Devin Hester. And who better to get this against than your former team, the Bears? So Cordero Patterson, big ups to you, man. He keeps grinding, man. The kickoffs, he had a good running game. They got the Commanders this week. This is a big game. If they can get this game, they might be setting themselves up pretty good. But like I said, with the NFC, I think it's going to be week to week. And who knows what's going to happen based on how these teams are playing. And they're so up and down. Congratulations to the Falcons.
And Danny, just to recap the week here in the NFL, just a few games to highlight. The Eagles squeak it out against the Indianapolis Colts 17-16 off of a late touchdown run by Jalen Hurts. The Eagles go to 9-1. And so that's going to be, again, an interesting game against the Packers, but I actually look for the Eagles to win it. But any given week, Sunday, whatever the case may be, a team can go ahead and rise to the occasion. A surprise here, the Detroit Lions goes ahead and beats the New York Giants for the Lions' third straight victory. You got to watch out for the Lions, man. They're starting to turn this thing around. They're 4-6. So this is going to be interesting to see who really pulls out second place in the NFC North. So we'll see. It seems like the Minnesota Vikings has that division pretty much wrapped up. But, oh, boy, they took a whooping against the Dallas Cowboys, man. Golly, 40-3. And it was at Minnesota too, Danny. I'm not just saying this because, I obviously follow the Packers and everything, but the Vikings Fugazi.
Hey, that's what I'm saying.
Gold,
I'm saying, man, the NFC.
It seems like year after year with the Vikings, or when they're good, you just don't know if they're good.
Yep.
Because they have performances like this. Dallas took Justin Jefferson, really the wide receiving core out of the game here. Justin Jefferson only had 3 catches for 33 yards, Danny.
Mm-hmm.
Kirk Cousins only had 105 yards passing the ball. This was just a butt whooping. And I can't trust Minnesota. If I had money on a game, especially in the playoffs with Minnesota, I'm not putting on Minnesota. You kidding me? Over the history, no, I can't put on Minnesota. So that was an interesting game. Another interesting game here, Danny. Of course, the Chiefs and Chargers, 30-27, where the Chiefs outlast the Chargers. Patrick Mahomes, 20 for 34, 329 yards, 3 touchdowns. And let me just say this, Danny. Travis Kelce, 6 receptions. He actually caught all the 3 touchdowns Patrick Mahomes threw. You got to start really looking at the Chiefs as being obviously that top team in the AFC, along with the Buffalo Bills. And then you start looking at the NFC, and of course, you can't say nothing about Minnesota because they just lost big time. But you have to start looking at the 49ers and where they went ahead and blew out the Arizona Cardinals 38-10. But it was in Mexico City, man. So big shout out to the 49ers for winning in Mexico City. 4 touchdowns by Jimmy Garoppolo. Gotta start looking at 49ers as serious contenders, man. This is going to be interesting between the 49ers and the Eagles. Don't know what the Cowboys are going to do here. That's going to be interesting matchups later on down the road here. But kudos to the 49ers. What say you, Danny?
So, Jason, one thing of note with Minnesota, I will say, is their victories. They're all been with the one-score game. So they do know how to pull games out at the end. So if they're in a crunch, I still think they can do some damage. This game, I don't know what happened to them, man. They were just bum rush from the get-go. They fumbled. Kirk Cousins fumbled right off top. The Cowboys, Tony Pollard and Zeke got going. They got their running game going. And that's huge. When those two are going, Dallas is tough to play. Like the Eagles, too. The Colts had the Eagles. They had the rights in that game. In the fourth quarter, down, they had them 13-3, and they let the Eagles back in the game. So the Eagles pulled that one out, and it was a nice run by Jalen Hurts, I'll tell you that, to get that victory. Yeah, the 49ers, they look tough, man. They're getting healthy. They have Elijah Mitchell, a starting running back, spelling CMC, Christian McCaffrey. And that's huge, man. So they don't have to wear down Christian McCaffrey over the course of the season now. They can spell him. You got Debo back there. Kittle had a great game yesterday. And the Cardinals, Colt McCoy, 49ers defense was all over him last night. So they need Kyler Murray back bad, just from his mobility standpoint, because the offensive line isn't blocking. And the 49ers were getting in and sacking Colt McCoy. That's not his fault. It's just protection wasn't there. That's where you need a mobile quarterback in those scenarios to help that out. Like I said, the Giants, Saquon had 22 yards rushing, and they play the Cowboys on Thanksgiving. That's a big game. I think more from the Giants standpoint than the Cowboys standpoint, because if the Giants lose again and they lose convincingly, there's going to be some doubt starting to creep in that locker room where they've been flying high and they've been doing well. But this is a key game for them as they get ready for the playoff push. And if they get blown out on national TV, that might be tough for them. I know their schedule is not the hardest coming down the stretch, but it's just one of those things from a confidence standpoint that they need to get this W or at least keep it really close.
And now, Danny, on to college football, and where my Florida A&M Rattlers, my beloved alma mater, has beaten the brakes off of Bethune-Cookman Wildcats 41-20 in the Florida Classic. And let me just say, 41-20, I am so happy that we won, and I definitely watched that game. and it was something to really behold. But let me just say this, Danny. As a result of that game, that made 9 wins in a row by my Florida A&M Rattlers. 9 wins in a row in a SWAC conference.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just say that we were banking on making the playoffs on Sunday. The selection committee decided not to include Florida A&M in the playoffs. And there's a whole lot of controversy. There's a whole lot of thoughts surrounding that. Let me just say this, Danny. Let me ask you this: how many teams make the playoffs?
24.
24. You're right. 24 teams, 9 wins in a row.
Mm-hmm.
We lost our first 2, one to obviously University of North Carolina.
Yep.
And the next one to Jackson State, which was a drubbing. I will admit that. We lost big time against them. There could be a whole lot of reasons why, obviously, with some administrative matters there. But nonetheless, we lost that game against Jackson State. And then we rolled off 9 in a row. Let me just say this, Danny. I think the selection committee made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when you have a team who has won 9 games in a row, they're doing something here.
They're on a roll.
They're on a roll, man. You kidding me? I mean, and this is my thing sometimes with college football. They say you have to have these impressive wins and all that stuff, and forget about a win is a win and stuff like that. I would say though, I mean, against Bethune-Cookman, I think that was an impressive win against a foe, a rival. Mm-hmm. Even though Bethune may be having a down year, nonetheless, a rival is a rival. Anything can happen in that game. There are teams that has made this playoffs that had a worse record than Florida A&M University.
Mm-hmm.
You have several teams with like a 7-4 mm-hmm. record, some with a 6-5 record that are in. I'm just baffled, quite frankly, of the selection committee and how things, are etched in stone that these teams get in. But I think there's got to be a change that happens, man, when it comes to this.
Mm-hmm.
4 teams with records of 7-4. 4.
Yep.
And some of them weren't even playing well down the stretch, Danny. And so I'm just a little baffled by this. And I'm just thinking that something's got to change in the future here. I don't know if this may be an opportunity, maybe in where the Celebration Bowl extends out to maybe 4 teams.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a 14 playoff system for the Celebration Bowl. I don't know. We'll see. I think though student athletes would like to play for a national championship at that playoff level, but there's something that's got to be done and said. I mean, there's some talks and thoughts about how good is the SWAC conference. Maybe it wasn't as strong as in past years, based on the records overall of the SWAC. I don't know. I think the SWAC conference and the commissioner needs to really kind of sit down and kind of think things through here with regards to how do we improve the level of all schools in the SWAC conference so that way we never run into this again. Is it more resources, more money, or whatever the case may be that comes from the conference to the schools in the division so that way we can compete better amongst each other, but also when we go outside of the conference, we represent well, have a good showing so that way again, we don't run into this again. I don't know, but something's got to change, Danny. What say you?
A few teams that got pulled in that had worse records, and like you said, it wasn't like they're on fire coming into this FCS playoff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this goes to what was the criteria, like we have with these selections all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What was the criteria that Florida A&M on the outside looking in, and you can come up with a whole different level of theories and theories on it,
mm-hmm.
but what was it and why didn't they get selected? Because would they have gotten selected if that game was closer against Jackson State is a question.
Mm-hmm.
The North Carolina game, I think, is a wash. It's out of conference. It's, I think that one's a wash. And then all the stuff that was going on. And that's the factors too, though. All the factors going on with the school at the time as well, with the players
mm-hmm.
and the administration and all that stuff was going on at the beginning of the year. And for them to bounce back the way they did and run the gamut the rest of the way, there has to be something said for that. And that's where this is kind of fishy.
But Danny, to add to that, we played North Carolina,
mm-hmm.
but we played well against North Carolina. We scored 24 points
mm-hmm.
against, North Carolina. So I think that says something there where we played well against that school.
Mm-hmm.
Then the following week, we obviously, get blown out against Jackson State. And a lot of that could be due to obviously the mindset of the student athletes and all. But so like you said, a lot of factors.
Yep. And that's why I'm like, okay, if that game was say 27-24 against Jackson State, does that make a difference in this? And everything all being equal, right? They run off 9 in a row after that game. But I guess we'll have to find out what the reasoning was behind this. And I think FAMU got snubbed.
And Danny, having said all that, I gotta give props where props is due to Jackson State University Tigers football team, led by Coach Prime, and where they actually went 11-0 this season. They are ranked number 5 in the FCS. According to the latest polls. I actually would have loved to have seen how they performed in the playoffs, but due to circumstances in dealing with the SWAC championship game, and then ultimately the winner of that championship game goes to the Celebration Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the playoffs would have already started, so that eliminates them from being able to make the playoffs. But Danny, congratulations to Jackson State. What say you?
This was the first time in history they went undefeated, and this is back to Coach Prime. But the thing is, even though they've done this and it's a great accomplishment, they want that Celebration Bowl after what happened last year and
mm-hmm.
all the hype.
Mm-hmm.
And for them to fall flat like they did in that game, first off, they got to win the next game to see who they play on December 3rd. But saying they win that game on December 3rd, then it's a Celebration Bowl. And that's what they want. You go undefeated, get that game, and then that's a success. Because if you saw Coach Prime's post-game interview, he wasn't happy. He was all like, yeah, that's great and all, but we didn't play well. And a lot of the things that plagued them in that game last year in that Celebration Bowl showed on this past week, where they weren't protecting. And
thank you for joining us at Back Porch Talk Podcast. You can also join us on Twitter by tweeting us at @back_podcast. For more information, you can go to our website, which is backporchtalkpodcast.com. You can also email us at backporchtalkpodcast@gmail.com. Again, thank you for joining us, and remember that there's enough hate in the world, so go ahead and spread a little love.